The medical bay doors slid open with a hiss that made everyone inside turn their heads. Two massive dragons pushed through the entrance, their scales dulled by exhaustion and fear. Between them, cradled in the mother's front talons, lay a tiny hatchling no bigger than a house cat. Even from across the room, Owen Blake could see the infant struggling to breathe. He had been organizing supply cabinets when the emergency call came through. Now he stood frozen, watching 5 of the station's top medical experts rush toward the dragons. The parents lowered their baby onto the examination platform with movements so gentle it broke something inside Owen's chest. The luminary physician arrived first, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the walls. She placed her gleaming hands above the hatchling and closed her eyes. Energy scanners built into her biology swept through the tiny dragon's body. After 30 seconds, she stepped back and shook her head. "The cellular degradation is too advanced," she said, her voice like wind chimes. "I cannot reverse this." Next came the aquarian surgeon, his tentacles moving with practiced precision as he attached monitoring devices to the hatchling's chest. Numbers and symbols that Owen couldn't read scrolled across floating screens. The surgeon's large eyes dimmed from bright blue to dark gray. "Organ failure across multiple systems," he announced. Even with transplants, the rejection rate would be fatal. The cerebrite diagnostician approached next, all 4 of his massive brains visible through his transparent skull. He didn't need to touch the patient. His telepathic scan took only moments before he turned to the parents. "I have reviewed 17,000 similar cases in my memory banks," he said. "None survive beyond this stage. The neural pathways are already shutting down." The chitin healer clicked and chirped as she ran her own tests, her insect-like body moving in jerky motions around the table. She injected 3 different compounds into the hatchling's bloodstream. Nothing changed. She backed away without speaking, her antennae drooping. Finally, the Vaporian expert drifted forward, his gaseous form coalescing into something almost solid. He passed through the hatchling's body like smoke, analyzing from the inside out. When he reformed, his color had shifted from green to deep purple. "The damage is systemic," he said quietly. "There is nothing we can do. I am sorry." The mother dragon made a sound that no translation device could properly convey. It was grief made audible. Her mate wrapped his neck around hers, and together they stared down at their dying child. Owen felt his feet moving before his brain caught up. He crossed the medical bay in quick strides, his worn boots squeaking on the polished floor. The other doctors watched him with expressions ranging from pity to irritation. "Excuse me," Owen said, stopping a respectful distance from the parents. "My name is Dr. Owen Blake. I'm a veterinarian from Earth. Would you allow me to examine your hatchling?" The crystalline luminari actually laughed. "A veterinarian? This is a sentient being, not some farm animal." Owen kept his eyes on the dragons. "I understand, but I've spent 30 years treating creatures that couldn't tell me where it hurt. I learned to look for things others might miss." The father dragon, his bronze scales catching the harsh medical lights, lowered his massive head until one golden eye was level with Owen. "You believe you can help where these masters of galactic medicine cannot." "I don't know," Owen admitted, "but I'd like to try." The mother dragon looked at her mate. Something passed between them, some silent communication that needed no words. She turned back to Owen and gave a single, slight nod. Owen approached the examination table. The hatchling was beautiful despite its obvious distress. Silver blue scales covered its small body, and tiny wings lay folded against its sides. Its breathing came in rapid, shallow gasps that he pulled out his personal medical scanner, a device the other doctors considered laughably primitive. He also grabbed his stethoscope, the same one he'd used on everything from horses to hamsters back on Earth. The aquarian surgeon scoffed at the sight. Owen listened to the hatchling's heart first. The rhythm was wrong, but not in the way the others described. He checked the gums, the eye response, the temperature. He palpated the tiny belly with careful fingers, feeling for swelling or hardness. Then he did something none of the advanced physicians had done. He asked to see what the hatchling had been fed, The mother produced a bottle containing a silver liquid. Owen unsealed it and took a cautious sniff. His eyes widened. "This is standard Dracani formula?" he asked. "Yes," the father confirmed. "Approved by the Galactic Nutrition Council. The finest available." Owen turned to his scanner and ran a chemical analysis. The results made his jaw tighten. He looked up at the other doctors, then back at the desperate parents. "Your baby isn't sick," he said slowly. "Your baby is starving." The cerebrite diagnostician's brains pulsed with indignation. "Impossible. We scanned for nutritional deficiencies. There were none. You scanned based on adult Dracani biology," Owen countered. "But hatchling metabolism is completely different. This formula has all the macronutrients, but it's missing trace minerals that newborns need. Minerals they can't synthesize on their own yet." He pulled up his scanner data and projected it onto the main screen. "See this? The bone density is half what it should be. The blood chemistry is off. The organs aren't failing because of disease. They're failing because they don't have the building blocks they need to function." The luminary physician studied the data, her glow dimming slightly. "Even if you are correct, creating a proper supplement would take weeks of laboratory work." "Then we better get started," Owen said. He looked directly at the dragon parents. "I need access to your biochemistry lab, and I need it now. I can't promise anything, but I've seen this before in Earth reptiles. If we act fast, there's a chance." The mother dragon's eyes blazed with sudden hope. "Do whatever you must." The station director, a four-armed Tetrakan administrator, stepped forward from where he'd been observing. "Dr. Blake, you are not authorized to." "I am authorizing him," the father dragon interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "This is my child, my choice." Owen was already moving toward the lab. He had 24 hours to prove he wasn't crazy. He had 24 hours to save a life everyone else had given up on. The biochemistry lab hummed with machinery that Owen barely understood. He stood at the main workstation, surrounded by equipment designed for species that didn't share his biology. His fingers moved across the holographic interface, translating chemical formulas from Earth standards into something the alien synthesizers could produce. Behind him, through the observation window, a small crowd had gathered. Medical staff from across the station pressed against the glass, watching the human work. Some looked curious. Most looked skeptical. A few were taking bets on how long until he admitted defeat. Owen ignored them all. His focus stayed on the compound taking shape in a molecular assembler. Calcium, magnesium, zinc, selenium. Trace elements that seemed insignificant but meant the difference between life and death for a developing creature. He'd seen it 100 times on Earth. Foals born weak because the mare's diet lacked copper. Lizards with metabolic bone disease from missing vitamin D3. Chicks that couldn't grow feathers without proper amino acids. The galaxy's medical experts treated disease and injury with incredible skill. But somewhere in all their advancement, they'd forgotten that bodies needed fuel before they needed fixing. The synthesizer beeped. Owen carefully extracted a vial of pale green liquid and held it up to the light. It looked nothing like the silver formula the hatchling had been drinking. He ran it through the scanner 3 times, adjusting the mineral ratios with each iteration. "This is madness," a voice said behind him. Owen turned to find a cerebrite diagnostician standing in the doorway, all 4 of his brains glowing with neural activity. "Maybe," Owen said, "but it's madness based on 30 years of experience. Experience with primitive Earth creatures," the cerebrite countered. "The Dracani are an advanced species with complex biology. You cannot simply apply barnyard medicine to them." Owen set down the vial carefully. "Tell me something. In all your memory banks, in all those 17,000 cases you mentioned, did anyone ever check what the mothers were eating during pregnancy?" The cerebrite's glow flickered. "That would be unnecessary. Dracani adults regulate their own nutrition instinctively." "Adults, yes," Owen said. "But what about developing embryos? What about newborns whose systems aren't mature enough to regulate anything?" He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's evolutionary history. "On my planet, we have over 8 million species. Every single one needs something different. We learned real fast that one size doesn't fit all. The Cerebrite studied the display in silence. Finally, he spoke. The Galactic Medical Council standardized nutrition protocols 2 centuries ago. It eliminated numerous deficiency diseases across multiple worlds. For adults, Owen repeated. But babies aren't small adults. Their needs are different. He picked up the vial again. I'm not saying your medicine is wrong. I'm saying it's incomplete. Before the Cerebrite could respond, the lab door burst open. The Luminari physician rushed in, her crystalline body pulsing with urgency. The hatchling is declining, she said. Heart rate is dropping. You need to come now. Owen grabbed his vial and ran. The medical bay felt smaller with both dragon parents inside. They had moved closer to the examination table, their massive bodies radiating protective heat. The tiny hatchling lay motionless except for the faint rise and fall of its chest. Owen approached quickly, checking the monitors. The numbers were worse than when he'd left. He had minutes, maybe less. I need to administer the supplement directly, he said, pulling out a feeding tube. It has to reach the digestive system to work. The Aquarian surgeon extended a tentacle to block him. That tube could perforate the esophagus. The tissue is too fragile. I've threaded feeding tubes into creatures the size of my thumb, Owen said quietly. I know what I'm doing. The mother dragon made a low sound deep in her throat. The surgeon withdrew his tentacle. Owen's hand stayed steady as he measured the tube against the hatchling's small body. He'd done this procedure hundreds of times, but never on a dragon, never with so many eyes watching, never with stakes this high. He gently opened the tiny mouth and began to slide the tube down. The hatchling didn't even flinch. That scared Owen more than anything. It meant the baby was too weak to fight. The tube reached the stomach. Owen attached a syringe filled with his green supplement and slowly pressed the plunger. The liquid disappeared into the hatchling's body. He withdrew the tube with the same careful precision. Now came the hardest part. Waiting. How long until we see results? The father dragon asked, his voice tight with controlled fear. I don't know, Owen admitted. In Earth reptiles, anywhere from 2 hours to 2 days. But I've never treated a draconi before. The chitin healer clicked softly. You do not even know if it will work at all. No, Owen agreed. I don't. The mother dragon lowered her head until she was eye level with Owen. This close, he could see the texture of her scales, the depth of worry in her gaze, the way her nostrils flared with each anxious breath. Why are you doing this? She asked. You owe us nothing. You risk your reputation, perhaps your career. Why? Owen looked at the tiny hatchling, then back at her. 3 years ago, my daughter got sick. The doctors ran every test, tried every treatment. They had machines that could see inside her cells, medicines that could target individual proteins. But none of it worked. They told us to prepare for the worst. He paused, swallowing hard. I kept asking them to try different things, look at different angles. They said they tried everything that made sense. They said I needed to accept reality. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. She died 2 days before her 7th birthday. The medical bay had gone completely silent. I made a promise at her funeral, Owen continued, that I would never tell a parent to give up while their child was still breathing, that I would try everything, no matter how unlikely, no matter how simple it seemed. He looked at the hatchling again. So that's why. Because someone should have tried everything for my daughter, and because I can try everything for yours. The mother dragon touched her snout gently to Owen's shoulder, a gesture of understanding that crossed species boundaries. The station director's voice crackled over the intercom. Dr. Blake, you have 24 hours to show improvement. After that, standard protocols resume. Owen checked his watch and settled into a chair beside the examination table. Then I better not waste time sleeping. The mother dragon curled her body around one side of the table. The father took the other side. Together, the three of them began their vigil over the tiny life that hung in balance. Hour 3. Owen administered the second dose of supplement, his movements mechanical from years of practice. The hatchling's breathing remained shallow but steady. No improvement, no decline, just endless, agonizing stability on the edge of failure. The mother dragon, who had introduced herself as Sereth, watched every movement. Her mate Torvin had left briefly to update their family, but Sereth never moved from her spot. Her eyes tracked the monitors, the rise and fall of her baby's chest, the careful way Owen handled the feeding tube. "You do this often on Earth?" she asked quietly. "Save the dying?" Owen prepared the next syringe. "Sometimes. Not always. Animals can't tell you what's wrong, so you learn to read their bodies. You learn to trust what you see instead of what the textbook says should be there." Hour 6 arrived with a crisis. The hatchling's breathing suddenly became labored, raspy sounds coming from its tiny throat. Alarms blared across the monitors. The Vaporeon expert, who had been observing from the doorway, drifted forward. "The treatment is making it worse," he said, his gaseous form shifting to an alarmed orange-colored. Owen's mind raced. The breathing, the timing. He'd seen this before in a calf he'd treated years ago. The supplement had been too strong, too concentrated for an underdeveloped digestive system. "I need distilled water," he said, already moving toward the supply cabinet. "Now!" He diluted the next dose by 30%, then 40%. He checked and rechecked his calculations. If he was wrong, he might kill the hatchling himself. If he was right, this might buy them time. That he administered the adjusted formula and waited 10 minutes later, the raspy breathing eased. The alarms quieted. Owen let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Hour 12 came with no visible change. The cerebrite diagnostician appeared in the doorway, his four brains pulsing in complex patterns. "You should rest," he said. "This vigil serves no purpose." "It serves every purpose," Owen replied without looking up from his notes. He was documenting everything, every tiny variation in vital signs, every response to treatment. If this failed, maybe the data would help the next doctor save the next hatchling. "Even if the baby survives," the cerebrite continued, "you have shown nothing that proves your theory. Temporary stabilization is not recovery." Owen set down his tablet. "You're right, but temporary stabilization is better than death. And every hour this baby stays alive is another hour for its body to heal." The cerebrite considered this. "You humans have an expression. Hope is not a strategy." "No," Owen agreed. "But giving up isn't one either." Outside the observation window, more staff had gathered. Word had spread through the station. Some came to watch what they expected to be a failure. Others came because they wanted to see a miracle. Most came because watching someone fight impossible odds was better than whatever else they had planned for their shift. Hour 18. Owen's eyes burned from lack of sleep. His back ached from hunching over the examination table. His hands trembled slightly as he prepared another dose. Sereth noticed. "You need rest," she said gently. "I need your baby to live," Owen countered. He administered the dose and returned to his monitoring. Then he saw it. A slight change in the scale color around the hatchling's neck. He leaned closer, hardly daring to breathe. The dull gray was brightening, just a shade, just barely visible unless you knew what to look for. "Sereth," he said carefully, "what color should a healthy hatchling's scales be?" "Silver blue," she answered immediately. "Like moonlight on water." "What?" Owen pointed. "Look at the base of the neck. Compare it to 5 hours ago." Sereth moved her massive head closer, her golden eyes focusing on her baby. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then a sound emerged from her throat, something between a sob and a laugh. "It's brighter," she whispered. "Owen, it's brighter." Torvin rushed back into the room, having heard his mate's cry. Together they stared at their baby, looking for more signs of change. Hour 22. The vital signs had stabilized at better levels than when Owen started. The breathing was deeper, more regular. The heartbeat stronger. The monitoring equipment that had screamed warnings for days now hummed with steady, stable readings. The luminary physician entered with the station director behind her. "Dr. Blake, your time is nearly." She stopped, her crystalline body refracting light in sharp, surprise patterns. "The readings have improved. Significantly," Owen confirmed. He showed her his documented data. Oxygen absorption is up 14%. Neural activity has increased. Digestive function is beginning to normalize. The station director's forearms crossed in a gesture of reluctant acknowledgement. This is unexpected. Hour 24 arrived. Owen administered what he hoped would be the last dose before anyone tried to stop him. He withdrew the feeding tube and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hatchling's eyes opened. They were the color of summer sky, bright and clear and aware. The tiny dragon looked up at the massive faces of its parents, then at the strange two-legged creature standing nearby. It made a sound, a small chirping trill that was the most beautiful noise Owen had ever heard. Seraph made a sound that was definitely a sob this time. Torvin curved his neck around his family, his eyes glistening with tears too large for any human to shed. The medical bay erupted. Staff who had been watching through the window rushed in, talking over each other. The cerebrite diagnostician stood motionless, his forebrains processing what his memory banks said was impossible. The Aquarian surgeon's tentacles waved in an agitated pattern that Owen had learned meant extreme surprise. The station director raised all four arms for silence. Dr. Blake, it appears your unorthodox methods have produced results. The baby isn't out of danger yet, Owen cautioned, even as relief flooded through him. It needs continued treatment, careful monitoring, gradual increase in feeding. Whatever you require, Torvin said immediately. Name it and it is yours. Owen looked at the tiny hatchling, now moving its head to track sounds, its wings twitching with new strength. I just need to make sure this little one gets everything it needs to grow strong. The hatchling chirped again, louder this time. Seraph carefully extended one talon and stroked her baby's head. The tiny dragon leaned into the touch, a gesture of trust and comfort that made Owen's chest tight. Outside the window, the crowd had grown to over 50 beings from a dozen different species. They weren't betting on failure anymore. They were witnessing something they'd been told couldn't happen. They were watching one stubborn human prove that sometimes the simplest answer is the right one. 3 days after the hatchling opened its eyes, Owen's small office became the busiest place on the station. 6 more Draconi families arrived with dying babies. Then 12 more. Then 20. The medical bay transformed into a nursery of desperate hope. Owen moved between examination tables, checking each tiny patient. Every hatchling showed the same symptoms. Gray scales, labored breathing, failing organs. Every single one responded to his mineral supplement within hours. The pattern was impossible to ignore. This is not random, Owen told the assembled medical staff during an emergency meeting. He projected data across the main screen, charts and graphs that told a devastating story. In the last century, Draconi hatchling mortality has climbed to 87%. That's not a disease. That's a systemic problem. The cerebrite diagnostician studied the numbers with all 4 of his brains engaged. The timeline correlates with the Draconi integration into galactic society. Exactly, Owen said. He pulled up more data. 50 years ago, the Draconi stopped hunting in their traditional grounds. They adopted modern agricultural practices, imported galactic food standards, and transitioned to processed nutrition. He highlighted a specific column. And 50 years ago, their birth survival rate started dropping. Sarah stood at the back of the room, her grown hatchling sleeping in a specialized cradle beside her. Are you saying galactic civilization is killing our children? I'm saying the change in diet created a nutritional gap. Owen explained carefully. Adult Draconi can synthesize the missing minerals from other sources. Your body's adapted, but embryos and newborns can't adapt fast enough. They need those specific trace elements that only exist in your ancestral food sources. The Luminari physician's crystalline body dimmed with something that might have been shame. We ran nutritional scans on every patient. How did we miss this? Because your scans were calibrated for established Draconi biology, Owen said. You were looking at what adults need, not what developing babies need. It's like using a map of the ocean to navigate a river. Same water, completely different terrain. Torvin stepped forward, his bronze scales gleaming under the harsh lights. Can this be fixed? Can we save our species? Owen nodded. Yes, but it requires changing how you approach prenatal care. He displayed his treatment protocol. Expectant mothers need mineral supplementation starting in the second trimester. Hatchlings need specialized formula for their first 6 months. And honestly, it wouldn't hurt to reintroduce some traditional foods into the general diet. The station director's forearms gestured in patterns Owen had learned meant bureaucratic resistance. The Galactic Medical Council has approved all current Draconi nutrition protocols. Changing them requires extensive review, multiple committees, years of testing. Your committees can meet while babies die, Owen said flatly. Or you can implement emergency measures now and do the paperwork later. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. The Aquarian surgeon broke it. The human is correct. We have empirical evidence that his treatment works. Every hatchling he has treated has improved. Some are already strong enough to leave medical care. Because I got to them in time, Owen said. But there are hundreds more across Draconi space that we'll never reach. Thousands that will be born in the coming months. We need to spread this information now. The Cerebrite diagnostician's brains pulsed in deep thought. The council will resist. They will claim insufficient data, demand long-term studies, question the credentials of a veterinarian over established xenobiologists. Then let them question, Torvin said, his voice carrying the authority of his species. The Draconi High Council speaks for our people. We will implement these protocols with or without galactic approval. Over the next 2 weeks, Owen barely slept. He trained Draconi medics in proper hatchling nutrition, showed them how to identify deficiency symptoms, taught them to mix the mineral supplements correctly. He transmitted his protocols to every Draconi colony world, uploaded his research to public medical databases, and made himself available for consultation at all hours. The results came quickly. Birth survival rates on the closest Draconi worlds climbed to 76% within 3 months. Healthy hatchlings that would have died now thrived. Families that had given up hope started trying again, but resistance came too. The Galactic Medical Council convened an emergency session to address what they called dangerous medical revisionism. 3 prominent xenobiologists published papers claiming Owen's success was coincidental or temporary. The Chiton Healers Guild issued a statement warning against primitive approaches to advanced species care. Owen sat in his office reading the latest critique when the Cerebrite diagnostician entered. The alien's 4 brains showed unusual patterns, flickering between colors Owen didn't recognize. "They are calling you reckless," the Cerebrite said without preamble. "They say you ignore established science." "I know," Owen replied tiredly. "They claim your methods cannot possibly work because they contradict fundamental principles of xenobiology." "I know that too." The Cerebrite was quiet for a moment. "I wrote one of those papers. The one claiming your results were statistically anomalous." Owen looked up sharply. "I was wrong," the Cerebrite continued. "I have reviewed every case personally. The evidence is irrefutable. Your treatment works because you understood something we forgot in our pursuit of universal medical standards." He moved closer to Owen's desk. "You understood that life is diverse, not uniform." "Thank you," Owen said quietly. "Do not thank me. I am apologizing." The Cerebrite's brains shifted to a deep blue color. "We believe that advanced medicine meant finding single solutions that work for everyone. We created protocols that treat all patients the same, assuming similarity where there is actually vast difference." He gestured toward the window, where healthy dragon hatchlings played under their parents' watchful eyes. "You showed us that the most sophisticated approach is recognizing each species' unique needs." Owen stood and walked to the window. "On Earth, we have a saying. When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. It means look for common solutions before rare ones." He watched a silver-blue hatchling attempt its first clumsy flight. But sometimes the hoofbeats belong to a zebra. Sometimes the rare answer is the right one. And sometimes, the Cerebrite added, the simple answer is the sophisticated one. A message appeared on Owen's communication device. More Draconi families requesting help. More babies that needed saving. He picked up his medical bag. "Want to help me prove our critics wrong?" he asked the Cerebrite. All 4 brains glowed with what Owen had learned to recognize as a smile. It will be my honor. Together, they headed to the medical bay, where 23 hatchlings waited for their next feeding. The conference room on the station's upper level had been converted into a classroom. 40 medical professionals from 15 different species sat in seats designed for bodies nothing like theirs. They had come from across the galaxy, summoned by rumors of a human who saved the unsavable. Owen stood at the front, feeling distinctly out of place. These were some of the finest medical minds in known space. And here he was, a veterinarian from a backwater planet, about to tell them their methods were incomplete. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know many of you have doubts about what I'm teaching. That's fair. A year ago, I would have doubted it too." He activated the holographic display. Images of Earth animals fill the air. Dogs, cats, horses, birds, reptiles, fish, insects. On Earth, we have a unique problem. We're surrounded by millions of different species, all with different biology, different needs, different ways of staying alive. A medicine that saves a dog can kill a cat. Food that keeps a bird healthy will poison a rabbit. He let that sink in. We learned early that there's no such thing as universal treatment. Every patient is different. A luminary physician in the third row raised her crystalline hand. But we have universal treatments. The Galactic Medical Database contains standardized protocols that work across hundreds of species. For common problems, yes, Owen agreed. A broken bone is a broken bone. Mostly, an infection is an infection. But nutrition, development, those are completely individual to each species' evolution. He changed the display to show the Draconi hatchlings. These babies were dying because everyone assumed modern galactic nutrition was better than traditional diets. And for adults, it probably is. More efficient, more convenient, perfectly balanced for maintaining established systems. He zoomed in on cellular scans. But growing bodies don't maintain. They build. And building requires specific raw materials. The Cerebrite diagnostician, who had become Owen's teaching assistant, added his perspective. We approached each case looking for disease or injury. We never considered that the problem was absence rather than presence. Absence of essential elements. Owen nodded. That's the core lesson. Sometimes the problem isn't what's wrong. It's what's missing. Over the next 3 days, he taught them his methodology. Not just the Draconi protocols, but the thinking behind them. How to research a species' evolutionary history to understand their baseline needs. How to compare modern diets against ancestral ones. How to spot the gaps that advanced scans might miss because they weren't programmed to look for them. The students were brilliant but struggled with the concept. They'd been trained to treat pathology, not prevent it. They knew how to fix what was broken, but not how to ensure it never broke in the first place. "You want us to become nutritionists?" asked the Vaporian expert, his gaseous form swirling with confusion. "I want you to become complete physicians," Owen corrected. Medicine isn't just treating symptoms. It's understanding the whole organism, from cellular function to environmental context. He brought in case studies from other species. The aquarian surgeon presented a case of failing larvae in his home world's nurseries. Using Owen's methods, they discovered the water filtration systems were removing trace minerals the larvae needed for gill development. A simple adjustment saved an entire generation. The chitin healer shared how her species' colony ships were experiencing mysterious weakness in space-borne offspring. Owen helped them realize that without natural sunlight, the young weren't synthesizing a crucial vitamin. Supplementation and artificial UV exposure solved the problem within weeks. Each success built momentum. The resistance from the Galactic Medical Council began to crack. Not because Owen argued better, but because the results spoke louder than any debate that on the 5th day, a new patient arrived. A being from a species Owen had never encountered, something that looked like living crystal wrapped in bioluminescent vines. Their infant was dying, and 3 specialists had already declared the case hopeless. Owen studied the creature. This alien baby, so different from anything on Earth. He had no reference point, no similar cases in his memory. The anatomy was completely foreign. His students watched to see what he would do. "Tell me about your world," Owen said to the parents. "What does your species eat? Where do your people live?" What was different about the environment when your ancestors first evolved? The parents described a world of deep caves filled with specific mineral deposits. They describe how their people had migrated to surface cities, leaving the caves behind for modern life. Owen requested scans of the infant's biology and compared them to the mineral composition of those ancestral caves. The pattern emerged. The baby wasn't synthesizing light into energy correctly because it lacked exposure to the specific radiation signature of its species' original habitat. Can you recreate the cave environment? Owen asked the station engineers. They could. Within hours, the infant was placed in a chamber that mimicked those deep mineral caves. Specific wavelengths of light, particular electromagnetic frequencies, exact humidity, and pressure. The baby stabilized within a day. The luminary physician approached Owen afterward, her crystalline body pulsing with something like awe. You had never seen that species before. How did you know? I didn't know, Owen admitted. I guessed. But it was an educated guess based on a simple principle. Life adapts to its environment. Change the environment too fast, and young life struggles to adapt. He gestured toward the recovered infant. The question isn't what's wrong with the baby. It's what's different between now and when their species thrived. The Cerebrite diagnostician added this case to the growing curriculum. Each day brought new challenges, new species, new problems that required thinking beyond standard protocols. Owen watched his students begin to change how they approached medicine. They started asking about diet before prescribing drugs. They researched evolutionary history before declaring cases hopeless. They looked for what was missing before assuming what was broken. The Aquarian surgeon summed it up during the final session. You taught us to be doctors again, not just technicians following protocols. I taught you what Earth taught me, Owen replied. That diversity is the universe's greatest strength. Every species is unique. Every patient deserves treatment that respects that uniqueness. The students returned to their home worlds carrying new knowledge. Within months, infant mortality rates began dropping across multiple species. Problems that had seemed unsolvable were solved by asking different questions. The Galactic Medical Council finally issued a statement. Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. They created a new department, Evolutionary Nutrition and Development. They asked Owen to lead it, that he accepted on one condition: that they hire veterinarians, naturalists, and ecologists alongside traditional physicians. That they value diversity of thought as much as advanced degrees. They agreed. The medical revolution had begun, started by one stubborn human who refused to let a baby die. The sky above Draker burned with colors Earth had no names for. Owen stood on a platform overlooking the ceremonial grounds, watching hundreds of young dragons perform their first synchronized flight. Their scales caught the alien sunlight in patterns of silver, bronze, copper, and gold. Every single one of them should have been dead. 1 year had passed since he saved his first Draconi hatchling. 1 year since he proved that sometimes the galaxy's most advanced medicine missed the simplest solutions. Now he stood before the entire Draconi High Council and thousands of families whose children lived because he refused to give up. Sereth and Torvin approached the platform, their scales polished to ceremonial brightness. Between them walked a young dragon. No longer a helpless hatchling, but a strong juvenile with bright eyes and steady wings. Owen recognized him immediately. Owenris, Sereth announced to the crowd, approaches to honor his namesake. The young dragon bounded up the steps with enthusiasm that made Owen smile. At 6 months old, Owenris was the size of a large horse. All gangly limbs and oversized wings he was still learning to control properly. Dr. Owen Blake, the young dragon said in heavily accented but clear human language. You saved my life when everyone said I would die. My parents gave me your name, so I would always remember that giving up is never the only choice. Owen knelt down to the dragon's level. You were worth fighting for. Every life is worth fighting for. The Draconi High matriarch, an ancient dragon whose scales had faded to pale silver, stepped forward. Her voice carried across the ceremonial grounds without technological aid. 1 year ago, our species faced extinction. Our children died, and we had no answers. Advanced medicine, sophisticated technology, the finest minds in the galaxy. None could save us. She turned to Owen. Then came a human with primitive tools and simple questions. He asked what we were eating. He asked about our ancestors. He asked questions we had forgotten to ask ourselves. She lifted a talon and placed it gently on Owen's shoulder. Dr. Blake showed us that wisdom is not always complex, that sometimes survival means looking backward to move forward. That diversity of thought saves lives as surely as diversity of life enriches the universe. The crowd of dragons raised their voices in a harmonious sound that vibrated through Owen's chest. It was their highest honor, a song that transcended language. The Galactic Medical Council representatives stood to the side, looking distinctly uncomfortable. The same council that had called Owen reckless now awarded him their highest commendation. The Luminari physician who had doubted him stepped forward with a crystal medallion. The council recognizes Dr. Owen Blake for revolutionary contributions to xenobiological medicine, she said formally. Then she added in a softer tone, and we apologize for our blindness. You saw what we could not, because you never forgot that advancement and wisdom are not the same thing. Owen accepted the medallion, but directed his words to the young doctors scattered through the crowd. His students, coming from dozens of worlds to witness this moment. I didn't revolutionize anything, he said. I just remembered something we knew all along. Life is diverse. Infinitely diverse. On Earth, we learned this truth because we had no choice. We were surrounded by millions of species, each one different, each one teaching us that there's no single right way to exist. He gestured toward the flying dragons. The galaxy standardized medicine because standardization works for many things. It eliminated diseases, extended lifespans, spread healing across countless worlds. That's incredible. That's worthy of celebration. He paused. But standardization also created blind spots. It made us forget that every species evolved under unique conditions. That what works for one might fail for another. That young life especially needs individualized care because growth and development are the most variable processes in biology. The Cerebrite diagnostician joined him on the platform, all four brains glowing with warm colors. Dr. Blake taught us to ask different questions. Not what disease does this patient have, but what does this patient need that they're not getting? Not how do we fix what is broken, but how do we provide what is missing? These seem like small changes in thinking. They are actually fundamental shifts in medical philosophy. Owen nodded. Earth's greatest contribution to galactic medicine isn't technology. It's perspective. Humans spend our entire history learning that life takes infinite forms. We treated animals because we had to, and in doing so we learned that every species is a universe unto itself. Some need heat, others need cold. Some need minerals, others need specific bacteria. Some need darkness, others need light. There's no universal prescription because there's no universal patient. A young Aquarian medical student raised a tentacle from the crowd. But how do we know what each species needs? How do we learn the unique requirements of thousands of different forms of life? You ask. Owen said simply. You research their evolutionary history. You look at what their ancestors ate, where they lived, how they survived. You compare modern environments to ancestral ones and look for the gaps. You remember that every symptom is a message, and sometimes that message is something is missing rather than something is wrong. Owenris chirped enthusiastically, drawing laughter from the crowd. The young dragon had been trying to follow the conversation, but kept getting distracted by a flying insect. Sarah smiled at her son's antics before addressing Owen. You gave us our children. You gave us our future. What can we possibly give you in return? Owen watched Owenris finally catch the insect and immediately looked proud of himself. You already gave it to me. You let me try when everyone said it was hopeless. You trusted me when I had no proof, only theory and determination. He looked out at the hundreds of young dragons. And you let me prove that sometimes one person who refuses to quit can change everything. Torvin stepped forward. Then stay with us. Teach more students. Save more lives. Build this new medical philosophy you have started? I will, Owen agreed. But not just here. The institute we are building will accept students from every species. We will teach comparative medicine, evolutionary biology, nutritional development. We will create doctors who think across species boundaries, who value diversity, who never forget that their patients are individuals, not statistics. The ceremony concluded with the traditional Draconi blessing, a complex aerial display performed by the young dragons. Owenris participated enthusiastically, if not gracefully, his flight pattern more creative than coordinated. But he stayed airborne, his wings strong, his body healthy, his future bright. As the sun set over Draker, Owen stood with his colleagues, both alien and familiar, watching the dragons dance through the colored sky. The Cerebrite diagnostician stood beside him, along with the Aquarian surgeon, the Luminari physician, even the chitin healer who had once dismissed his methods. "We make a good team," the Cerebrite observed. "Because we are diverse," Owen replied. "Each of us sees things the others miss. Each of us brings something unique. That's not weakness. That's strength." A message arrived on Owen's communication device. A new emergency, a new species, a new patient that multiple specialists had declared beyond saving. Owen read it and smiled. "Shall we?" he asked his team. They returned to the medical bay together, ready to ask the questions others forgot to ask, ready to try what others deemed impossible, ready to prove once again that diversity of thought saves lives. Behind them, young Owenris flew through the sunset, living proof that sometimes the most advanced solution is remembering that every life is unique, every patient deserves individualized care, and giving up should never be the first option. The galaxy was learning, one patient at a time.